My stepdaughter looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not walking me down the aisle, Dave. I want my real dad there." Her words hit like, you know that feeling when you're sitting at dinner, minding your own business, maybe thinking about whether you remembered to lock the truck or if that leftover meatloaf in the fridge is still good, and then someone just casually drops a conversational grenade right into your mashed potatoes? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me on a perfectly normal Tuesday evening that turned into the worst night of my entire 46 years on this godforsaken planet. Sophia looked me dead in the eyes across the dinner table. And let me tell you, when someone looks at you like that, you know something bad is coming. Like when your doctor says, "We need to talk," or when your mechanic sucks air through his teeth while looking under your hood. And she said, calm as anything, "You're not walking me down the aisle, Dave. I want my real dad there." Real dad. Real dad. Those two words hit me like a freight train carrying a cargo of disappointment and irony. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, a piece of pot roast dangling pathetically from the tines, and I swear to God, I felt something inside me just break. Not like a dramatic movie break where someone throws things and yells, but like when you drop your phone and the screen cracks in that spiderweb pattern and you know it's never going to be quite right again, no matter how many times you tell yourself, it still works fine. I didn't drop my fork, though I really wanted to. I didn't flip the table, though the thought crossed my mind for about half a second. I didn't even raise my voice, which honestly should earn me some kind of medal or at least a certificate of achievement in self-control. I just nodded, jaw so tight I thought my molars might crack, and I thought to myself, wow, 12 years of fatherhood, 12 years of bandaging scraped knees and helping with homework and sitting through absolutely terrible school plays where kids dressed as vegetables sing off-key songs about nutrition, and I just got demoted to landscaper who pays for stuff. Laura was sitting there too, of course, looking at me with those wide eyes that seemed to be begging me not to make a scene, not to ruin dinner, not to point out the absolutely insane audacity of what her daughter just said. But what was I supposed to do? Argue? Beg? Remind Sophia that her real dad, Greg, hadn't shown up for a single parent-teacher conference, hadn't been there when she got her first period and freaked out, hadn't stayed up all night when she had the flu so bad we thought we'd have to take her to the ER? Yeah, that would have gone over real well. So instead, I set down my fork very carefully, pushed back from the table with the kind of controlled calm that would make a yoga instructor proud, and said, "Excuse me." Just that. 2 words. Then I walked away from that table like I was walking away from a car accident in slow motion. Except the car accident was my entire relationship with the kid I'd raised since she was 9 years old. I went straight to my office. Well, it's really just the corner of the garage where I keep my desk and all the paperwork for Miller Landscapes. And I pulled out my phone with hands that were shaking just a little bit, though I'd never admit that to anyone. Then I started making calls. First the caterer, then the band, then the venue. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Each conversation was basically the same. Hi. Yes, this is Dave Miller calling about the wedding for Sophia Miller. Well, technically Sophia Bennett, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, I need to cancel everything. Yes, everything. No, I understand about the deposits. That's fine. Consider it a donation to your retirement fund. And after 12 years of being the bigger person, of biting my tongue and writing checks and showing up and being there, I was done. Completely, utterly, 100% done. I'd spent over a decade building something I thought was real, something I thought mattered, and it turned out I was just the guy who paid for stuff. The landscaper with the checkbook. The placeholder dad until the real one decided to show up and claim credit for absolutely nothing. So yeah, I canceled the wedding. All 40 grand worth of deposits, flowers, cake, venue, band, photographer, gone. Just like that. And I didn't feel guilty about it. Not even a little bit. Well, maybe a little bit. But mostly I just felt tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling while Laura sobbed quietly beside me, I realized something important. You can do everything right, give everything you have, love someone with your whole heart, and it still might not matter. Sometimes people will look right past all of that and decide that biology matters more than showing up. That DNA matters more than dedication. That being a real dad is about one moment of conception rather than thousands of moments of actually being there. And that, my friends, is how a regular Tuesday dinner became the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about family, fatherhood, and what the hell I'd been doing with my life for the past 12 years. Let me back up a second here, because if you're going to understand how spectacularly my life just imploded over a plate of pot roast, you need to know who the hell I am and how I got to this particular circle of suburban dad hell in the first place. Name's Dave Miller, 46 years old, though some days I feel about 73 and other days I feel like I'm still 25 and just really confused about why my back hurts so much. I'm a landscaper by trade, which is a fancy way of saying I spend most of my days elbow deep in dirt, arguing with ornamental grasses and explaining to rich people that no, their hydrangeas are not supposed to be that color, and yes, they do actually need to water them occasionally. Shocking, I know. I've got dirt permanently embedded under my fingernails, the kind of dirt that doesn't come out no matter how much you scrub, like it's become part of my actual DNA at this point. My back aches pretty much constantly, especially on Mondays after I've spent the weekend doing the kind of heavy lifting that men my age probably shouldn't be doing, but do anyway, because we're stubborn idiots who refuse to admit we're not 25 anymore. But here's the thing, it's honest work, real work, the kind of work where you can actually see what you've accomplished at the end of the day, unlike those poor bastards who sit in cubicles pushing papers around and attending meetings about meetings. Me and my brother Mark started Miller Landscapes about 15 years ago with basically nothing except a dream, a questionable business plan scribbled on a napkin, and a whole lot of optimism that in retrospect was probably clinically insane. We had exactly one truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that coughed and wheezed louder than Laura's Chevy Malibu on a cold morning, and that's really saying something. That truck sounded like it was actively dying every time you turned the key, like it was begging you to just let it rest in peace already. We also had 2 shovels that looked like they'd been used to dig trenches in World War I, all rusty and worn with handles wrapped in duct tape because the original grips had disintegrated sometime during the Reagan administration. But you know what? We made it work. We hustled. We took every job that came our way, no matter how small or ridiculous. Want us to edge your driveway at 6 in the morning? Sure. Need someone to plant petunias in July when it's 95 degrees and humid enough to grow gills? We're your guys. Got a decorative rock garden that needs rearranging because your wife suddenly decided she hates the feng shui of the current configuration? Absolutely. We'll move those rocks around until the energy flows just right or whatever. Now, 15 years later, we've got a whole operation going. We've got a team of 10 guys. Well, 9 guys and 1 woman named Rita who can outwork all of us combined and isn't shy about reminding us of that fact on a regular basis. We've got multiple trucks that actually start on the first try, equipment that doesn't require a prayer and a sacrifice to the machinery gods just to function, and enough contracts to keep half of Allegheny County looking green and pretty. We do everything from basic lawn maintenance to full landscape design, hardscaping, irrigation systems, the whole 9 yards. We even did the landscaping for the new community center downtown, which was a huge deal and made my mom cry with pride, which made me uncomfortable but also kind of nice. I'm not rich, let's be real clear about that. I'm not driving a Mercedes or taking vacations to Europe or buying boats I'll use twice a year like some of our clients. But I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I own my house outright, no mortgage. I've got money in the bank, a retirement account that my accountant assures me is healthy, though I have no idea what that actually means, and enough left over to occasionally splurge on the good beer instead of whatever's on sale at the grocery store. And up until approximately 24 hours ago, I slept like a baby. I'm talking the deep, dreamless sleep of someone whose conscience is clear and whose body is too exhausted from physical labor to do anything except immediately pass out the second their head hits the pillow. Well, except for those nights when a certain teenager in my house decided to blast music at 1 in the morning and swear up and down it was study vibes, because apparently kids these days need lo-fi hip-hop beats to memorize biology terms. When I was in school, we studied in silence like civilized people, but what do I know? I'm just the old guy who doesn't understand modern learning techniques. The landscaping business is good, don't get me wrong. It's reliable. People always need someone to make their yards look nice, especially around here where everyone's competing to have the best lawn on the block like it's some kind of Olympic sport. But it's also hard work. Like, really hard work. The kind of work that leaves you sunburned in places you didn't know could get sunburned, with muscles soaring configurations you didn't know existed. I've pulled weeds in 100-degree heat. I've installed irrigation systems while being eaten alive by mosquitoes that apparently found me absolutely delicious. I've hauled 50-pound bags of mulch until I thought my spine might just give up and retire without me. But here's what I love about it. It's real. When someone hires us to transform their sad, patchy lawn into something beautiful, we do it. And then they can see it. They can walk outside and look at what we created and actually enjoy it. There's something satisfying about that, about making something ugly into something beautiful, about taking a mess and turning it into order. Maybe that's why I thought I could do the same thing with my personal life. Spoiler alert, landscaping skills don't translate to family dynamics. Who knew? My crew guys are good people mostly. They give me endless amounts of crap, which I guess is what happens when you work with the same bunch of knuckleheads for years on end. They've got opinions about everything. My truck, my lunch choices, my refusal to get a smartphone until Laura finally forced me to upgrade 3 years ago, and especially about my family situation. St. Dave. They call me sometimes, usually when they think I can't hear them. St. Dave raising another man's kid. Like it's some kind of charity case, like I'm running a non-profit organization for wayward children instead of just being a dad. I used to get mad about comments like that. I want to grab them by their shirts and explain that Sophia wasn't another man's kid. She was my kid in every way that actually mattered. But eventually, I just started rolling my eyes and firing back with something like, yeah, well, at least I don't still live with my mom at 35, Tommy. That usually shut them up pretty quick. Tommy definitely still lives with his mom, by the way, and she still does his laundry. The man is 37 years old. The thing about running a landscaping business is that it teaches you patience. You can't rush a garden. You can't force things to grow faster than they're meant to. You plant seeds, you water them, you give them sunlight and nutrients and time, and eventually, if you do everything right, something beautiful grows. I thought raising Sophia was the same way. I thought if I just showed up, put in the work, gave her everything she needed, that eventually she'd blossom into someone who appreciated it. Who understood that being a dad wasn't about biology, it was about showing up. Turns out gardens are more reliable than teenage girls. At least when you water a plant, it doesn't turn around 12 years later and tell you it wants a different gardener. So how does a reasonably intelligent, mostly functional landscaper in his mid-30s end up in this particular mess? Well, buckle up, because this is where I explain the series of decisions that seemed perfectly logical at the time, but in hindsight were probably about as smart as using a metal ladder during a thunderstorm. I met Laura at a company picnic about 13 years ago, one of those mandatory fun events that Miller Landscapes threw every summer where we'd rent out a pavilion at the park, grill way too many hot dogs, and pretend we actually enjoyed spending our precious free time with the same people we saw every single day at work. My brother Mark had insisted I come because apparently I was becoming antisocial and spending too much time alone, which honestly seemed fine to me, but whatever. Laura showed up because she was the sister of one of our supplier's employees, some connection I didn't fully understand and still don't, to be honest. She was 30 years old, and let me tell you, she was beautiful. Like, genuinely, naturally beautiful in that way that makes you forget how to form complete sentences for a few seconds. Dark hair, warm smile, eyes that crinkled at the corners when she laughed. But here's the thing I noticed right away. She looked tired. Not the regular, I didn't sleep well last night, tired, but the bone-deep, exhausted tired of someone who's been running on empty for way too long. She was driving a Chevy Malibu that had definitely seen better days, probably around the time George W. Bush was still president. That car wheezed and groaned like an asthmatic smoker trying to run a marathon. Every time she started it, I swear you could hear it begging for mercy, making sounds that no vehicle should ever make unless it's actively dying. The paint was faded, there was a crack in the windshield that had clearly been there for months, and when she opened the door, I could see the check engine light was on. Of course it was. And then I saw Sophia, 9 years old, skinny as a rail, hiding behind her mom's skirt like the world was too big and scary to face head-on. She had this enormous sketchbook clutched to her chest, one of those cheap ones from the dollar store with the spiral binding that always catches on everything. She wouldn't make eye contact with anyone, just peeked out occasionally from behind Laura with these huge brown eyes that looked like they'd seen too much for a 9-year-old. Later, when Sophia finally warmed up enough to show me what she was drawing, it was page after page of horses. Just horses. Realistic ones, cartoon ones, horses jumping over fences, horses running through fields, horses with elaborate braided manes. The kid was obsessed, and honestly, the drawings weren't half bad. Some of them were actually pretty impressive for a 9-year-old, way better than the stick figures I was still drawing at that age. I did what any normal human being would do at a company picnic. I struck up a conversation with Laura. Started with the usual small talk. Nice weather. How do you know so and so? Have you tried the potato salad? Spoiler. Don't try the potato salad. Rita makes it with way too much mayonnaise. But pretty soon we were actually talking, really talking, and she started opening up about her situation. Sophia's dad was a guy named Greg. And when I say was, I don't mean he died or anything tragic like that. I mean he vanished like a magician's assistant, except without the entertainment value or promise of coming back for the next show. He'd bounced when Sophia was 4 years old, just up and decided one day that fatherhood wasn't for him, like it was a gym membership he could just cancel. Poof. Gone. See you never. According to Laura, Greg sent money exactly once. $20 at Christmas, about 2 years after he left. $20. For Christmas. For his own daughter. Like she was running a lemonade stand, and he was a generous customer leaving a tip. I remember when Laura told me that, I literally had to bite my tongue to keep from saying something that would have been wildly inappropriate for a first conversation. $20. This guy thought $20 made up for abandoning his kid. The math on that is insulting. That's like $5 per year of her life at that point. Incredible. Laura was struggling hard. She was working 2 jobs, one as a receptionist at a dental office during the day and another cleaning offices at night after Sophia went to bed. Her mom would watch Sophia in the evenings. But that arrangement was getting harder because Grandma was getting older and Sophia was getting more energetic. Money was tight. The car was falling apart. Their apartment was in a rough neighborhood where gunshots weren't exactly uncommon background noise. Laura was drowning, basically, and trying to keep a smile on her face while she did it. And me? Well, I looked at this situation. A beautiful, exhausted woman with a sweet kid who drew horses and needed a father figure. Living in near poverty because some deadbeat decided parenting was optional. And I thought, perfect. I'll sign up for this chaos. Because apparently, I'm the kind of genius who sees a warning label that says danger, high voltage, and thinks, but how dangerous could it really be? To be fair, I didn't immediately jump into anything. I'm not completely stupid. We started slow. I got Laura's number, called her a few days later, asked if she wanted to grab coffee. She said yes, but had to bring Sophia because she couldn't afford a babysitter, which I said was totally fine. So our first date was at a Dunkin' Donuts with a 9-year-old third wheel drawing horses in her sketchbook while nursing a hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. Our second date was similar. And the third. By the fourth date, I realized that if I wanted to date Laura, I was getting Sophia as part of the package deal. And honestly, I was okay with that. More than okay. Sophia was a good kid. Quiet, polite, didn't throw tantrums in public or scream at her mother like some of the nightmare children I'd witnessed in grocery stores. She just wanted to draw her horses and occasionally ask questions about whether horses could eat peanut butter. No idea. Kid, but probably not a great idea. I met them in the summer. By fall, I was helping Laura with her car repairs, which were extensive and expensive, naturally. By winter, I was a regular fixture in their lives, coming over for dinner a few times a week, helping Sophia with her math homework because apparently 4th grade math is harder than I remembered. By spring, Laura and Sophia moved in with me. Yeah, I know. That's fast. Too fast, probably. My brother Mark told me I was crazy, that I barely knew them, that I was taking on way too much responsibility for someone else's kid. My mom was worried I was being taken advantage of, that Laura was just looking for a meal ticket and financial stability. My friends thought I'd lost my mind, throwing away my peaceful bachelor life for instant family drama. But here's what none of them understood. I wanted this. I wanted the noise, the chaos, the feeling of coming home to people who were happy to see me. I wanted to be someone's hero, someone's provider, someone's dad. I'd been living alone in my house for years, coming home to silence and leftover pizza, and it was fine, but it wasn't fulfilling. This felt like purpose. This felt like meaning. This felt like I was finally building something that mattered more than perfectly edged lawns and symmetrical flower beds. I was building a family, from scratch, taking broken pieces and making them whole. Man, was I naive. But we'll get to that part. You know how in corporate jobs people are always obsessed with promotions and titles and climbing the ladder? Well, I got the most important promotion of my life about 6 months after Laura and Sophia moved in, and it didn't come with a raise or a corner office or any of that nonsense. It came with a trip to the emergency room and a 9-year-old girl with tears streaming down her face. It was a Saturday afternoon in October, one of those perfect fall days where the air is crisp and the leaves are doing their whole colorful dying thing that everyone pretends to love. I was at work finishing up a big installation project at some lawyer's house. Because of course it was a lawyer, they're always the most particular about their landscaping. When my phone started buzzing in my pocket, I ignored it at first because I was elbow deep in topsoil and my hands were filthy, but it kept buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. When someone calls you that many times in a row, it's never good news. It's never, "Hey, just wanted to chat," or "What do you want for dinner tonight?" It's always something bad. So I wiped my hands on my jeans, which were already destroyed anyway, and pulled out my phone to see about 15 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Then I saw the voicemail notification. It was from Sophia's school. The elementary school secretary, Mrs. Henderson, with her professional but slightly panicked voice. "Mr. Miller, this is Hillside Elementary. Sophia has had an accident on the playground. She's okay, but she needs stitches. We've been trying to reach Laura but can't get through. Can you please call us back immediately?" My heart basically stopped. I didn't even explain to the lawyer why I was leaving. Just shouted something about a family emergency and ran to my truck like my life depended on it. Called the school back while I was driving, probably breaking about 7 traffic laws in the process, and told them I'd be there in 10 minutes. Mrs. Henderson said they'd already called an ambulance as a precaution, but that Sophia was asking for me. For me. Not her mom, not her grandma, not anybody else. Me. I made it to the school in about 7 minutes flat, which should tell you how many speed limits I ignored. When I ran into the nurse's office, I probably looked like a maniac, covered in dirt, sweating, wild-eyed, wearing work boots that were tracking mud everywhere. But I didn't care about any of that because there was Sophia, sitting on that crinkly paper they put on examination tables, holding a blood-soaked paper towel to her forehead, crying these big silent tears that absolutely destroyed me. Turns out she'd fallen off the swing, just lost her grip at the wrong moment, and went flying, landing face first into the wood chip area underneath. She had a gash on her forehead about 2 inches long, right above her left eyebrow, bleeding like crazy the way head wounds do even when they're not that serious. The school nurse had done her best to clean it up and apply pressure, but it definitely needed stitches. Professional stitches, not the let's superglue it and hope for the best kind of solution. The ambulance guys were already there. These 2 EMTs who looked way too young to be trusted with medical emergencies, but apparently that's just what happens when you get old. Everyone in authority starts looking like they should still be in high school. They wanted to transport Sophia to the hospital, but I said I'd drive her myself. I signed approximately 8,000 liability waivers while Sophia gripped my hand so hard I thought she might break my fingers. I carried her to my truck. Well, she could walk, but she was shaky and scared, so I just scooped her up like she weighed nothing, even though my back immediately regretted that decision. Got her buckled into the passenger seat, grabbed a clean shop rag from behind the seat to replace the blood-soaked paper towel, and headed to the ER while calling Laura's phone over and over again. It kept going straight to voicemail. Her phone was either dead or turned off, and I later found out she'd been in a staff meeting at the dental office where phones weren't allowed. Great timing. So there I was, sitting in the ER waiting room with Sophia, still in my muddy work clothes, probably looking like the world's most suspicious guardian. I half expected security to question whether I was actually supposed to be there with this kid. But Sophia was clinging to me like a koala, so I guess that convinced them I wasn't some random creep. The wait was eternal. You know how ERs are. Unless you're actively dying, you sit there for hours surrounded by people with mysterious ailments and crying babies and wait too many episodes of whatever terrible daytime TV show is playing on the waiting room television. I tried to distract Sophia by making stupid jokes. Asked her if she thought the scar would make her look tough, like a warrior princess. Told her about the time I fell off a ladder and needed 12 stitches in my leg. Showed her the scar to prove it. Made up ridiculous stories about how she could tell people she got the injury. Shark attack, sword fight with pirates, extreme horseback riding accident. She actually giggled through the tears at that last one. I don't even know how to ride horses, she said, voice all watery and small. Details, I told her. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. When they finally called us back, I held her hand through the whole thing. The doctor, this woman who looked like she could be a TV doctor, all competent and reassuring, explained everything she was doing. First, the numbing injection, which Sophia did not enjoy but handled like a champ. Then the actual stitching, which took forever because the doctor was being extra careful to minimize scarring. 7 stitches total, neat little black threads holding her forehead together. I kept cracking jokes the whole time. Told her she was being braver than half the grown men I knew, which was absolutely true. I've seen my crew guys cry over paper cuts. Asked if she wanted the stitches in a zigzag pattern to make them more interesting. Suggested we could bedazzle them with glitter. The doctor was trying not to laugh, which I considered a personal victory. By the time we were done, Laura finally called back, absolutely frantic. I explained everything while Sophia sat there with her bandaged forehead, exhausted from the adrenaline crash. Laura said she'd meet us at home, that she was leaving work immediately. The drive home was quiet. Sophia was staring out the window, looking small and tired and still a little shaky. We were almost to the house when she said, very softly, "Thanks. Dad. Dad. Not Dave. Not Mr. Miller. Dad." I pretended I didn't choke up right then and there. Kept my eyes on the road, cleared my throat like I had something stuck in it, and said, "Anytime, kiddo. That's what dads are for." Inside, though, fireworks, confetti, a full marching band playing triumphant music. I'd been promoted from mom's boyfriend to dad, without an interview, without a probationary period, without any of the usual corporate nonsense. No performance review necessary. Just one scared little girl who needed someone to show up, and I showed up, and that was apparently enough. That night, after Laura had fussed over Sophia and gotten her settled in bed with ice cream and a new sketchbook I'd run out to buy, I sat on the couch feeling like I'd won some kind of lottery I didn't even know I'd entered. I was a dad now. Not a stepdad, not a mom's boyfriend, not the guy who lived there. A dad. Full title, complete with all the responsibilities and none of the biological credentials. Best promotion I ever got. Those early years after the ER incident? Pure gold. I'm talking the kind of memories that make you smile like an idiot when you're stuck in traffic or waiting in line at the hardware store. The stuff that makes all the chaos and exhaustion and financial drain worth it. The kind of moments that, looking back now after everything that's happened, make me want to simultaneously laugh and punch a wall. Saturday mornings became sacred. Every single Saturday, without fail, the 3 of us would pile into my truck and head to Rusty's Diner. This hole-in-the-wall place on the edge of town that's been there since approximately the beginning of time. The booths have duct tape on the seats, the coffee tastes like it was brewed during the Carter administration, and the health inspection grade is probably a generous B- on a good day. But their pancakes? Absolutely legendary. Big as your head, fluffy as clouds, and cheap enough that I didn't have to take out a second mortgage to feed my family breakfast. Sophia would order the same thing every single time. Chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream and enough syrup to drown a small village. I'm talking a truly obscene amount of syrup. She'd pour it on until the pancakes were basically floating in a maple-flavored lake, and I'd sit there trying not to calculate how much sugar she was consuming or how much that was probably going to cost me in dental bills down the road. Laura would give me that look. You know the one, the pick your battles, look that every parent learns eventually. And I'd bite my tongue and let the kid eat her sugar bomb breakfast in peace. I'd always get the same thing too. The lumberjack special with eggs, bacon, sausage, hash browns, and toast. Enough cholesterol to kill a horse, but when you spend your days doing manual labor, you burn through calories like a furnace. Laura would get an omelet and steal bacon off my plate even though I offered to order her bacon every single time. "Yours tastes better," she'd say, which made absolutely no sense, but whatever. Women, man. We'd sit there for hours sometimes, just talking and laughing and people watching. Sophia would tell us about school, about her friends, about which boys were gross and which girls were being mean, and how her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had the worst breath ever. I'd tell stories about the ridiculous requests we got at work, like the lady who wanted us to arrange her garden rocks according to their astrological signs, whatever that means. Laura would update us on the drama at the dental office, which was apparently way more intense than you'd think a place where people get their teeth cleaned would be. Those Saturday mornings at Rusty's were perfect. Simple, cheap, and absolutely perfect. Then there were the rose gardens. Oh man, the rose gardens. When Sophia was about 12, she suddenly decided she wanted to grow roses. Not just one rose bush, mind you, but an entire rose garden. Because when a 12-year-old girl gets an idea in her head, she doesn't go halfway. She goes full obsessive mode. She'd been drawing horses her whole life, but apparently that phase was over, and now we were in the rose phase. She spent weeks researching varieties, reading books from the library about soil pH and pruning techniques, printing out articles about disease prevention. She made elaborate plans on graph paper showing exactly where each bush would go, color-coded by bloom time, so we'd have flowers all season long. She presented her proposal to me like she was pitching a business plan to investors, complete with a hand-drawn poster board and a speech about how roses were nature's most perfect creation. How could I say no to that? I mean, I could have. I probably should have, because I knew from professional experience that roses are finicky, disease-prone prima donnas that require constant attention and are basically the high-maintenance girlfriends of the plant world. But she was so excited, so passionate about it, that I heard myself saying yes before my brain could catch up and remind me what a pain in the ass this was going to be. So we built a rose garden. Well, I say we, but really I did about 90% of the work while Sophia supervised and occasionally handed me tools. We spent an entire weekend prepping the soil, mixing in compost and peat moss, and all the fancy amendments that roses supposedly need. We installed a drip irrigation system because hand watering was going to be a nightmare. We put down landscape fabric and mulch to keep the weeds down. We even built a little white picket fence around it because Sophia said it needed to look proper and elegant. Then came the actual planting. We bought 15 rose bushes from the garden center, which cost approximately $1 million. Or at least it felt that way when I was swiping my credit card. Hybrid teas, floribundas, a climbing rose for the trellis I built, all in different colors. Sophia had picked each one specifically, knew all their names like they were her children. Peace, Mr. Lincoln, Queen Elizabeth, Double Delight. Fancy names for fancy plants. I'm not gonna lie, those first few years, that rose garden looked pretty rough. Roses take time to establish, and despite all my professional landscaping knowledge, we had some serious learning curve issues. Black spot, aphids, Japanese beetles, powdery mildew, we dealt with it all. There were times when that garden looked less like a beautiful display and more like a rose graveyard, with sad brown leaves and disappointing blooms. But Sophia loved them anyway. She'd go out there every morning before school to check on them, talking to them like they were her friends. She'd come running inside with updates. Dad, the peace rose has 2 new buds. Or Dad, I think Mr. Lincoln needs more fertilizer. I'd dutifully go out and inspect whatever crisis or celebration she'd discovered, offering advice and helping her problem solve. By the time she was 14, that garden was actually beautiful. Stunning, even. Full, healthy bushes covered in blooms from May through October. Neighbors would stop by to compliment us on it, asking what our secret was. The secret was that I had a daughter who actually cared about something enough to work at it consistently, and I was willing to support that obsession even when it meant spending my Sundays treating fungal diseases and picking Japanese beetles off leaves. At 12, she started calling me Dad in front of her friends. Just casually, naturally, like it had always been that way. My dad and I are building a rose garden, she'd say, and my chest would puff up with pride like an idiot. Her friends would come over and I'd be introduced as my dad Dave, not my stepdad, or my mom's husband, or any of those qualifiers. Just Dad, like it was the most natural thing in the world. By 16, I had $25,000 in a college fund for her. 25 grand that I'd been tucking away bit by bit, month after month, year after year. Money that could have gone toward a new truck or a vacation or any number of things I wanted. But instead, it went into an account with Sophia's name on it, because that's what dads do. They sacrifice. They plan ahead. They make sure their kids have opportunities they might not have had otherwise. Meanwhile, my crew at work gave me endless amounts of grief about it. St. Dave, raising another man's kid. they'd say, shaking their heads like I was some kind of martyr or sucker or both. That's Greg's job, man. Why are you paying for his kid's college? And I'd roll my eyes and fire back with something like, she's not Greg's kid. She's mine. Also, you clowns still live with your moms, so maybe don't give me life advice. That usually shut them up pretty quick. Tommy definitely still lived with his mom. So did Jake. And Carlos only technically didn't live with his mom because he lived with his grandma instead, which somehow seemed worse. But here's the thing they didn't understand. The thing nobody seemed to understand. I wasn't doing any of this because I had to. I was doing it because I wanted to. Because being Sophia's dad wasn't a burden or an obligation. It was the best thing that had ever happened to me. It gave my life meaning beyond just running a business and making money and existing. Every pancake breakfast, every rose bush planted, every dollar in that college fund. It was all an investment in something bigger than myself. I was building a legacy, creating memories, being the kind of father I'd always wanted to be. The kind who shows up, who stays, who puts his kid first even when it's hard or expensive or inconvenient. I thought I was building something that would last forever. Something solid and real and unbreakable. Turns out I was building a house of cards, and I didn't even know it. Then puberty hit like a freight train carrying a cargo hold full of hormones and attitude, and suddenly I wasn't living with the sweet kid who loved pancakes and roses anymore. I was living with a teenager, which is basically like living with a tiny drunk person who hates you for reasons they can't fully articulate but feel very passionately about. It started small, like most disasters do. Little things I didn't think much about at first. The way she'd sigh heavily when I asked about her day, like I'd requested she explain quantum physics instead of just making basic conversation. The way she'd spend dinner glued to her phone, thumbs flying across the screen at superhuman speed, occasionally grunting responses to questions. The way thanks, Dad turned into whatever, and then eventually into just silence. But the real kicker? She stopped calling me Dad. Just like that. Without any announcement or explanation, I got demoted. Again. Suddenly I wasn't Dad anymore. I was Dave. Dave, pass the salt. Dave, can you drive me to Madison's house? Dave, I need money for the movies. Dave, like I was her roommate or her mom's friend or some random dude who happened to live in the same house. Every time she said it, it felt like a little paper cut on my heart. Not big enough to be dramatic about, not painful enough to make a scene over, but definitely there. Definitely stinging. I wanted to say something. I wanted to sit her down and ask what happened, why I suddenly lost my title, whether I'd done something wrong. But Laura kept telling me to let it go, that it was just a phase, that teenagers are weird and moody, and this was all completely normal. Don't be hard on her, Laura would say. She's just going through changes. It doesn't mean anything, but it did mean something. To me, anyway. I'd earned that dad title through years of showing up, and now it was just gone, stripped away like it never mattered in the first place. The demands started getting more expensive too. Dave, can you get me those sneakers? Everyone's wearing them. And by sneakers, she meant those ridiculously overpriced status symbol shoes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. $200 for shoes she'd wear for 6 months before deciding they were so last season and needed replacing. I wanted to reply, sure, Sophia. Everyone's also broke after buying them. Want that too. But I didn't. I stayed calm. I took a deep breath, counted to 10 like some parenting article told me to do, and calmly explained that $200 for shoes was insane and we could find something similar for less. Cue the eye roll. Oh God, the eye rolls. If eye rolls were Olympic events, teenage Sophia would have won gold every single year. She perfected this particular look. The exasperated sigh combined with the dramatic eye roll and the slumped shoulders that communicated, without words, that I was the most embarrassing and unreasonable human being who'd ever existed. You don't understand, she'd say, in that tone that suggested I was approximately 1 million years old and completely out of touch with modern civilization. Nobody wears the cheap versions. I'll look stupid. And Laura, bless her heart, would sometimes side with Sophia. Dave, maybe we could stretch the budget this once. She's been getting good grades. Which was true. Sophia was a solid B+ student. But since when did we pay $200 for every B+? That's not how the real world works. But apparently, I was the bad guy for pointing that out. So yeah, I bought the shoes. And the expensive jeans. and the particular brand of backpack that everyone apparently needed to survive high school, and the homecoming dress that cost more than my first car, and the yearbook ad, and the class ring, and on and on and on. I became Dave the ATM. Dave the guy who paid for stuff. Not Dad. Not the person who built you a rose garden or rushed you to the ER or taught you how to ride a bike. Just Dave, the walking wallet who occasionally said embarrassing things at dinner and didn't understand that Snapchat and TikTok were completely different and stopped asking her to explain it for the millionth time. The Saturday pancake tradition died somewhere around her 15th birthday. Suddenly she was too busy, had too much homework, needed to sleep in because she'd been up late studying, which I knew was code for up late on her phone watching YouTube videos and texting friends. But whatever. I'd suggest Rusty's Diner and get a maybe next week that never materialized. The rose garden became my responsibility entirely. She stopped going out there, stopped caring about Mr. Lincoln and Peace and all the other roses she'd named. When I asked if she wanted to help deadhead the spent blooms or treat the aphids, she'd look at me like I'd asked her to perform surgery. I'm busy, Dave. Always busy. Busy doing what exactly? Sitting on the couch scrolling through social media? But sure, too busy to spend 20 minutes in the garden we built together. I try not to take it personally. I really did. Laura kept reminding me that this was normal, that all teenagers pull away from their parents, that it wasn't about me specifically. She still loves you, Laura would say. She's just figuring out who she is. But here's the thing, it felt personal. It felt like rejection. Like I was being systematically erased from her life, downgraded from Dad to Dave to eventually just the guy who pays for stuff. Every eye roll, every heavy sigh, every time she chose her phone over a conversation with me, it chipped away at something inside me. My crew at work noticed I was grumpier than usual. Trouble at home? Mark asked one day while we were loading equipment. Teenager, I said, like that explained everything. And honestly, it kind of did. Mark's kids were still little, so he just nodded sympathetically like people do when they don't fully understand but want to be supportive. The worst part was the double standard. When Laura asked Sophia to do something, clean her room, do the dishes, whatever, Sophia might grumble, but she'd do it. When I asked, World War III, you'd think I'd requested she donate a kidney or run a marathon. The attitude, the arguments, the door slamming, all reserved specially for me. Dave, you're not my real dad. You can't tell me what to do, she screamed once during a fight about her curfew. She'd wanted to stay out until midnight on a school night. I'd said 11. And apparently that was tyrannical oppression worthy of a revolution. That particular sentence hung in the air like a grenade that had already detonated. Laura went pale. Sophia looked immediately horrified, like she couldn't believe those words had come out of her mouth. And me? I just stood there, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut by someone I'd spent years protecting from exactly that kind of pain. You're right, I said quietly. I'm not your real dad, but I'm the one who's here. I'm the one who cares about whether you're safe. And the curfew is still 11. Then I walked away before she could see how much that had hurt. Before I could say something I'd regret. Before I could point out that her real dad wouldn't have given her a curfew because her real dad couldn't be bothered to even know where she was or what she was doing. Laura tried to smooth it over later. She didn't mean it. She was just angry and said something hurtful. But she did mean it. Maybe not consciously, maybe not deliberately, but somewhere in her teenage brain, I'd been recategorized. I wasn't Dad anymore. I was Dave, the stepdad, the guy who wasn't really her father but pretended to be. And the really messed up part? I kept showing up anyway, kept paying for stuff, kept enforcing rules and making sure she had everything she needed and being there even when she made it crystal clear she didn't want me to be. Because that's what dads do, apparently. Even when they're not real dads. Even when they get demoted to Dave. Even when every interaction feels like evidence that they're failing at the one thing they thought they were good at. I told myself it was temporary. A phase. That eventually she'd grow out of it and realize how good she had it. How much I'd done for her. How much I loved her despite the attitude and the eye rolls and the constant reminder that I wasn't her real father. Spoiler alert, it wasn't temporary. It was practice for the main event. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, guess who decided to make his grand reappearance? That's right, Greg. Mr. I send $20 every leap year. Captain Deadbeat himself. The man, the myth, The legend who'd mastered the art of being completely useless for over a decade suddenly decided he wanted to be Father of the Year. It started with a Facebook message. Because of course it did. In the modern age, absent parents don't show up at your door with flowers and apologies. They slide into your DMs like they're trying to hook up with an ex. Laura showed me the message one night. Her face all conflicted and worried, like she knew this was going to be a problem, but didn't want to be the one to say it out loud. Hey Laura. It read, with the kind of casual tone you'd use to reconnect with an old college roommate, not the mother of the child you abandoned. Hope you're doing well. Been thinking a lot about Sophia lately. She's what, 17 now? Wow, time flies. I'd really like to reconnect with her if that's okay. I know I haven't been around, but I'd like to change that. Let me know. Let me know. Like he was asking permission to borrow a lawn mower, not requesting access to the daughter he'd ignored for 13 years. The audacity was breathtaking, really. I had to admire the sheer confidence it took to send that message without even acknowledging what a monumental piece of garbage move it was to disappear in the first place. What do you think? Laura asked me, and I could tell she already knew what I thought, but was hoping I'd surprise her with some kind of mature, enlightened response. I think, I said, choosing my words very carefully, that this is a terrible idea that will blow up in everyone's face. But it's not my decision. Which was true, technically, even though it felt like it should have been my decision since I was the one who'd actually been parenting this kid for the past decade plus. Laura talked to Sophia about it. And Sophia, being 17 and therefore convinced she knew everything about everything, was immediately on board. Thrilled, even. My dad wants to see me, she said, like Greg was some celebrity who'd finally noticed her existence. Not my dad who abandoned me. Not my dad who sent $20 that one time. Just my dad, with all the excitement of a puppy seeing its owner come home. I wanted to point out that Greg probably wanted something, money, a place to crash, an ego boost, whatever, but I kept my mouth shut. Because I'd learned by this point that saying anything negative about Greg just made me the villain. I was the jealous stepdad trying to keep a daughter from her real father. Never mind that I'd been the real father in every way that actually mattered for years. Biology trumps showing up, apparently. So Greg started coming around. And let me tell you, the guy had not improved with age. He showed up in a car that made Laura's old Malibu look like a Mercedes by comparison. He was working some vague job that he never quite explained. Something about freelance consulting, which is code for unemployed but trying to sound important. He dressed like he was still in his 20s, which would have been fine except he was pushing 45 and it just looked sad. Skinny jeans that were too skinny, band t-shirts for bands that broke up before Sophia was born, a leather jacket that was trying way too hard. But Sophia? She ate it up. Suddenly Greg was the coolest person alive. He took her to concerts, on my dime, indirectly, since I was still paying for everything else, so Laura had money to give Sophia for spending money that inevitably funded these adventures. He bought her trendy coffee drinks and let her vent about how Dave doesn't understand me, and played the role of fun parent perfectly because he had no actual responsibilities. That's the thing about deadbeat parents who show up late to the game. They get to be Disneyland. They get to be all fun and no rules, all presents and no consequences, all bonding and no boring stuff like enforcing bedtimes or insisting on homework or caring about grades. Greg didn't have to pay for her braces or her car insurance or her college fund. He didn't have to discipline her or worry about her or lose sleep over whether she was making good choices. He just had to show up occasionally, be charming, and reap all the benefits of parenthood without any of the actual work. And it was working. Sophia started talking about Greg constantly. My dad says this. My dad thinks that. My dad took me to this amazing restaurant. My dad. The title I'd earned through years of showing up had been transferred to a guy who'd done literally nothing to deserve it except provide some DNA 17 years ago. One night, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone. Her door was cracked open, and I was walking past to get something from the linen closet. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but I also didn't exactly announce my presence when I heard my name. Dave's just the money guy, Sophia said, and I froze in the hallway like I'd been turned to stone. Like, he pays for stuff and whatever, but he doesn't really get me, you know? My real dad gets me. He understands what it's like to be creative and free-spirited. Dave's just so boring and practical all the time. Boring and practical. The money guy? Those words echoed in my head like a taunt. I stood there in the hallway feeling like the world's biggest sucker, like I'd just been informed that the past decade of my life had been a joke, and I was the punchline. I was boring and practical because I had a job, because I paid the bills, because I made sure there was food in the fridge and a roof over our heads and money for college. I was the money guy because I actually gave a damn about whether she had a future beyond just vibes and good times. Meanwhile, Greg was creative and free-spirited, which was a generous way of describing a 45-year-old man who couldn't hold down a steady job and still thought playing guitar in a garage band was a viable life plan. But sure, he got her. He understood her in ways that I, the boring practical guy who'd raised her, apparently never could. I didn't confront Sophia about what I'd heard. What would be the point? She'd just deny it or get defensive or tell me I was being too sensitive. And Laura would take her side, would tell me I was overreacting, would remind me that Sophia was just figuring things out and I needed to be patient. But something shifted in me that night. Some fundamental understanding that no matter what I did, no matter how much I gave or sacrificed or showed up, it would never be enough. Because I wasn't her real dad. I was just Dave, the boring, practical money guy who paid for her life, but didn't really matter. Greg kept coming around. Birthday dinners where he'd show up with some cheap present that Sophia would gush over like it was the most thoughtful gift ever. Meanwhile, I'd bought her a car for her 16th birthday and got a "thanks, Dave" and a shrug. Father's Day where Sophia would post photos with Greg on social media with captions about how blessed she was to have such an amazing dad. Meanwhile, I'd spent the day working on a landscape project because nobody mentioned Father's Day applied to me. The worst part? Laura seemed oblivious to how much this was destroying me. She was just happy that Sophia had her father back in her life, that they were healing their relationship, that everything was working out. She didn't see, or didn't want to see, that every moment Sophia spent praising Greg was another knife in my back. "You should be happy for her," Laura said once when I made some comment about Greg's latest magical appearance. "She's getting to know her father. That's a good thing." "He's not her father," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "I am. I've been her father since she was 9 years old. He's just some guy who showed up after all the hard work was done." Laura gave me that look. That disappointed, judgmental look that suggested I was being petty and jealous and small. "Dave, you're her stepfather. That's different." And there it was. Even Laura, even the woman I'd married and built a life with, was drawing that line. Stepfather, not father. The guy couldn't get a job, a haircut, or a clue. But sure, he was dad and I was just the stepfather. Just Dave. Just the money guy. I stopped arguing about it. What was the point? I'd lost a battle I didn't even know I was fighting, against an opponent who'd won by doing absolutely nothing except being biologically related to a kid he'd abandoned. Captain Deadbeat had returned, and somehow, impossibly, he was winning. Fast forward a few years and Sophia got engaged at 21 to a guy named Julian. Thank God it wasn't a Caleb or a Braxton or one of those other names that sound like someone sneezed while trying to say a real name. Julian was actually a decent kid. Well, decent man, I guess, though at 23 he still looked like he needed permission to use sharp scissors. He was a teacher, high school English, which meant he had a steady paycheck and actual career prospects and didn't live in his mom's basement. Already he was miles ahead of Greg in the life achievement department. I liked Julian. He was polite, called me sir, until I told him to knock it off because it made me feel ancient, and he genuinely seemed to love Sophia. He was patient with her dramatic tendencies, laughed at her jokes even when they weren't funny, and didn't seem to mind that she could be high maintenance enough to require a full pit crew. Most importantly, he had a job and a plan and wasn't going to bail the second things got difficult. The bar was low, sure, but he cleared it with room to spare. When Julian asked for my blessing to propose, I said yes. We had this whole awkward conversation in my garage where he was sweating bullets, and I was trying not to laugh at how nervous he was. "I love her, sir. I mean, Dave," he stammered. "I'll take care of her. I promise." And I believed him. Kid seemed solid. Seemed like he'd actually show up for the hard parts of life, not just the fun parts. So they got engaged and immediately started planning this wedding. And when I say planning, I mean Sophia went full bridezilla mode, which apparently is a thing that happens to otherwise reasonable women the second they get a ring on their finger. Suddenly nothing was too expensive, too elaborate, or too ridiculous. She needed the perfect venue, the perfect dress, the perfect flowers, the perfect everything. And who was going to pay for this perfect everything? If you guessed Dave the money guy, congratulations, you've been paying attention to the story. 40 grand. The wedding was going to cost $40,000. For one day. One single day that would be over in approximately 6 hours. I've bought trucks that cost less. I've done entire landscape installation projects for small businesses that cost less. But sure, let's drop 40 grand on a party because apparently that's what you do when your daughter gets married. Laura thought it was reasonable. It's her special day, Dave. Every girl dreams about her wedding. Which, fine, dream away, but most dreams don't come with a price tag that could fund a year of college or a down payment on a house. But I agreed to it anyway, because what else was I going to do? Say no and be the villain who ruined her special day? I'd already been demoted to supporting cast in this family drama. Might as well pay for the production too. I didn't just write checks, though. I got involved. I actually gave a damn about making this wedding perfect because despite everything, despite the Dave instead of dad and the eye rolls and the "you're not my real father" comments, I still loved this kid. She was still my daughter in every way that mattered to me, even if it apparently didn't matter to her. So I built a wooden arch for the ceremony. From scratch. Spent weeks on it, designing it, cutting the wood, sanding it until my hands had blisters on top of blisters. I carved decorative details into it, stained it this rich mahogany color that Laura said looked elegant and timeless. I treated it with weatherproof sealant, so it would survive the outdoor ceremony without warping. I worked on that thing like it was Michelangelo's masterpiece, like it was going to be displayed in a museum instead of used for one day, and then probably shoved in someone's garage to gather dust. Every evening after work, I'd be out in my workshop, covered in sawdust, perfecting this arch. My hands were torn up, my back was killing me, but I kept working on it because I had this vision of walking Sophia down the aisle and seeing her get married under something I'd built with my own hands. Something that would be in all the photos, this physical representation of my love and effort and investment in her happiness. I helped pick the venue, a beautiful barn venue outside Pittsburgh with string lights and rustic charm and all those things that Pinterest has convinced young women are essential for weddings. I met with the caterer multiple times to finalize the menu. I taste tested approximately 70 different cake flavors until I couldn't tell the difference between vanilla bean and French vanilla anymore. I negotiated with the florist, the photographer, the DJ, the rental company for chairs and tables. I did all of this willingly, happily even, because I was going to walk my daughter down the aisle. That was the whole point. That was the moment that would make all of it worth it. That walk, that symbolic gesture of giving her away, that public acknowledgement that I was her father and I was entrusting her to someone else's care. And then came that Tuesday dinner, the pot roast dinner, the nuclear bomb dinner. We were sitting there, the four of us, me, Laura, Sophia, and Julian. Just a regular family dinner to discuss some final wedding details. I was in a good mood, actually. The arch was finished, the deposits were paid, everything was falling into place. 3 months until the wedding, and we were right on schedule. Sophia cleared her throat in that way people do when they're about to say something they know is going to cause problems. I should have recognized that sound. Should have braced myself. But I was an idiot, happily eating my pot roast, completely unprepared for what was coming. So, Sophia said, not quite making eye contact with me, I've been thinking about the ceremony. About who's going to walk me down the aisle. I smiled. Yeah? You want to go over the timing again? I can walk slower if you want more time for the entrance. No, it's not that. She took a breath. I want my real dad there. I want Greg to walk me down the aisle. The world stopped. I'm not being dramatic. Time literally seemed to freeze for a second while my brain tried to process what she'd just said. Surely I'd misheard. Surely she didn't just say what I thought she said. But then she kept talking, words tumbling out in a rush like she'd rehearsed this speech. You're important to me, Dave. You really are. But Greg is my father. My biological father. And I think he should be the one to give me away. You understand, right? You're my stepdad, and I love you. But this is different. This is about family. Real family. Real family. There it was again. That word. Real. Like nothing I'd done for the past 12 years was real. Like the ER visits and the rose gardens and the college fund and the $40,000 I was spending on this wedding weren't real. Like I wasn't real. I looked at Laura, expecting her to jump in, to say something. to defend me, or at least acknowledge how insane this was. But she was looking at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. She'd known. She'd known Sophia was going to do this, and she hadn't warned me, hadn't given me a heads up, had just let me walk into this ambush completely unprepared. Julian looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Smart kid. I didn't drop my fork, even though my hand was shaking. I didn't flip the table, even though I wanted to. I didn't yell or cry or make a scene. I just looked at Sophia, really looked at her, this young woman I'd raised since she was 9 years old, and I nodded. I understand, I said, my voice remarkably calm considering my entire world was crumbling. My jaw was so tight I thought my teeth might crack. You want your real dad there. The way I said real dad had just enough edge that everyone at the table flinched. Good. They should flinch. It's not personal, Dave, Sophia said, which is what people always say when something is extremely personal. You've done so much for me. You'll still be there. You'll still be part of the day. Right, I said. I'll be there. In the audience. Watching. While Greg, the guy who sent you $20 one Christmas and then disappeared for over a decade, walks you down the aisle and gets credit for raising you. Dave, Laura started, but I held up my hand. No, it's fine. Really, it's fine. Sophia wants her real dad there. I get it. Biology matters. Showing up doesn't. I pushed back from the table, standing up with careful control. Excuse me. I have some phone calls to make. I walked to my office, that corner of the garage where I kept all the paperwork, and I started calling. The caterer first. Hi. Yes, this is Dave Miller. I need to cancel the catering for the wedding. Yes, I understand about the deposit. That's fine. Cancel it. Then the venue. Then the florist. Then the photographer. Then the DJ. Then the rental company. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Each conversation was brief, professional, decisive. Yes, I understand about the deposits. Yes, I know I'm losing money. No, I don't want to reschedule. Cancel everything. I could hear raised voices from the house. Laura shouting, Sophia crying, Julian trying to play peacemaker. I didn't care. I was done. Completely, utterly, 100% done. The wooden arch I'd spent weeks building? Still in my workshop. I walked past it on my way to call the last vendor, ran my hand over the smooth wood I'd sanded until my hands bled, and felt absolutely nothing. All those hours, all that effort, all that love poured into a piece of furniture for a wedding that wasn't going to happen. At least, not on my dime. Let Greg pay for it. I muttered to myself as I made the final cancellation call. Let's see how that works out. Let's see if Captain Deadbeat can actually step up and fund his daughter's wedding. Spoiler alert. He couldn't even pay for a Happy Meal without checking if he had enough in his account and wincing at the balance. When I walked back into the house, Laura was waiting by the door, mascara running down her face. How could you, she whispered. You just ruined everything. I ruined everything? I almost laughed. I'm not the one who decided the guy who paid for everything doesn't get to be part of the big moment. I'm not the one who chose a deadbeat over someone who actually showed up. That was your daughter. Our daughter. No, I said quietly. Your daughter. She made that pretty clear. I didn't leave that night, even though every fiber of my being wanted to pack a bag and disappear. But I'm not Greg. I don't just bail when things get hard. So I stayed, sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't stand the thought of being in the same bed as Laura, who'd apparently known about Sophia's plan and had decided keeping me in the dark was the best strategy. Smart move, Laura. Really stellar communication there. The next few weeks were what I imagine purgatory feels like. Sophia alternated between avoiding me completely and crying dramatically about how I'd ruined her wedding. Laura tried to play mediator, suggesting compromises that all basically amounted to me funding a wedding where I'd be treated like a guest instead of a father. Julian, to his credit, stayed out of it, probably realizing this was way above his pay grade. Greg, naturally, was nowhere to be found. Turns out when you actually need someone to step up and pay for things, the free-spirited creative guy suddenly becomes very busy with his freelance consulting work. Sophia called him multiple times asking if he could help with the wedding costs. He made a lot of vague promises about seeing what he could do and checking his finances, which I could have told her was code for, I'm broke and have no intention of helping. But nobody wanted to hear, I told you so from boring, practical Dave. The money guy who didn't get people. I spent those weeks thinking, really thinking, in a way I probably should have done years ago. I thought about the past 12 years, about every moment I'd invested in this family, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd put their needs before my own. I thought about the ER visit when Sophia called me dad for the first time. I thought about the rose garden we'd built together. I thought about the college fund that now had over $30,000 in it. Money I'd saved penny by penny for a kid who thought I was just the money guy. I thought about Laura, too. About how she'd stood by and watched Sophia treat me like an ATM and never once defended me. About how she'd known Sophia was going to ask for Greg to walk her down the aisle and hadn't warned me, hadn't prepared me, had just let me walk into that ambush. About how, when push came to shove, she sided with her daughter over her husband, even when her daughter was being cruel and ungrateful. And I realized something important. I was done. Not done being hurt, not done being angry, just done. Done trying to earn a place in a family that would never fully accept me. Done being the backup dad who funded everything but received none of the credit. Done sacrificing my own self-respect for people who took me completely for granted. So I filed for divorce. Laura didn't see it coming, which was almost funny considering how oblivious she'd been to everything else. I handed her the papers one morning before work, calm as anything, like I was handing her the newspaper. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. "Divorce papers," I said simply. "I'm done, Laura. I can't do this anymore." "You're divorcing me because of the wedding?" Her voice was rising, getting shrill. "Because Sophia hurt your feelings?" "I'm divorcing you because after 12 years, I'm still an outsider in my own family. I'm divorcing you because you let your daughter treat me like garbage and never once stood up for me. I'm divorcing you because you knew she was going to ask for Greg and you didn't tell me, didn't prepare me, just let me get blindsided. I'm divorcing you because I deserve better than being someone's plan B." She started crying, of course. Told me I was overreacting, that Sophia still loved me, that we could work through this. She said I was being selfish, that I was abandoning them just like Greg had, which was rich coming from someone who'd spent 12 years letting me be treated like a second-class citizen in my own home. "Think about Sophia," she wailed, like that was supposed to change my mind. "I did think about Sophia," I said quietly. "I thought about her every single day for 12 years. I thought about her when I rushed to the ER. I thought about her when I built that rose garden. I thought about her when I opened the college fund. I thought about her when I spent $40,000 on a wedding. And you know what? She doesn't think about me. Not really. I'm just Dave, the guy who pays for stuff. And I'm done being that guy." The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Pennsylvania isn't a quick state for these things, but I had a good lawyer and a clear case. We'd been married for 11 years, so there was property to divide, assets to split, all that fun stuff. Laura tried to claim she deserved more because she'd given up her career to be a stay-at-home mom, which was interesting since she'd never actually stopped working. She wanted alimony, wanted half the business, wanted the house. She didn't get any of it. Well, she got some money. The court ordered me to pay a settlement, which was fine. But she didn't get the house, didn't get part of Miller Landscapes, didn't get ongoing alimony. My lawyer pointed out that she'd been working throughout our marriage and was perfectly capable of supporting herself, and the judge agreed. Sophia tried to talk to me exactly once during the divorce proceedings. She showed up at my office. Well, the job site where I was working, looking small and sad, like she used to look when she was 9 years old. "Dave, please don't do this," she said. "Please don't leave. We can fix this." I looked at her, this young woman I'd raised, and felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not even disappointment anymore. Just nothing. Empty. "You already left, Sophia," I said. "You left the moment you decided Greg was your real dad, and I was just the guy who paid for things. You left every time you called me Dave instead of Dad. You left when you told your friends I was boring and practical and didn't get you. You've been leaving for years. I'm just finally acknowledging it. I didn't mean." "Yes, you did. You meant every word. And that's fine. You're an adult now. You get to decide who matters to you. But so do I. And you've made it very clear that I don't matter." "Not really. So no, we're not going to fix this. There's nothing to fix. This is just me finally accepting reality." She started crying, and I felt a little bit bad about that, but not bad enough to change my mind. I'd spent 12 years putting her feelings before my own. I was done doing that. After the divorce was finalized, I did something I'd been dreaming about for years. I moved to a cabin in the Poconos. Not some fancy vacation home, A real cabin, rustic and simple, on 5 acres of wooded property about 2 hours from Pittsburgh. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, with a wood-burning stove and well water, and the kind of peace and quiet that I hadn't experienced since before I met Laura and Sophia. I kept working with Miller Landscapes, but I handed over most of the day-to-day management to my brother Mark. I took on consulting jobs, did landscape design work remotely, showed up for the big installations, but otherwise stayed at my cabin. Mark thought I was having some kind of breakdown, but I'd never been clearer about anything in my life. I was choosing myself for once, choosing peace over drama, choosing silence over constant demands. The cabin became my sanctuary. I'd wake up to bird songs instead of alarm clocks. I'd have my coffee on the porch watching deer wander through the property. I'd spend my days working with my hands, chopping wood, maintaining the property, building things just because I wanted to, not because someone demanded it. I'd read books, watch movies, cook elaborate meals just for myself. For the first time in over a decade, I was alone, and it was glorious. My brother kept me busy with work, which I appreciated. Turns out when you're good at what you do and you have a solid reputation, people still want to hire you even if you're living like a hermit in the woods. We picked up some major contracts, a golf course redesign, landscaping for a new shopping center, several high-end residential projects. Miller Landscapes was doing better than ever, actually, probably because I wasn't distracted by family drama anymore. 3 years passed. 3 peaceful, drama-free, gloriously boring years. I dated a little bit, nothing serious. Went out with a woman named Christine for about 6 months, but it fizzled out naturally when we both realized we weren't looking for anything serious. Had a brief thing with someone named Rachel who lived in the next town over. Mostly, though, I was content being alone. Turns out after spending 12 years in a family that didn't appreciate me, solitude felt like a vacation. And then, on a random Tuesday afternoon in October, because apparently all the worst things in my life happen on Tuesdays, there was a knock on my cabin door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never got visitors. Mark called before coming out. Christine and I had been done for over a year. The UPS guy just left packages on the porch. So when I opened the door and saw Laura and Sophia standing there, I legitimately thought I was hallucinating for a second. They looked rough. Laura had aged, not just the normal 3 years older aging, but hard-living aging. Her hair had more gray, her face had more lines, and she'd lost weight in a way that suggested stress rather than intentional dieting. Sophia looked tired, worn down, like life had beaten the entitled princess attitude right out of her. "Dave," Laura said, and her voice cracked on my name. "We need to talk." I stood in the doorway, not inviting them in, not saying anything, just waiting. "We need help," Laura finally admitted when the silence got too uncomfortable. "We're in trouble. Financial trouble. The engagement with Julian fell through. He realized who he was marrying? I couldn't help myself." Laura flinched, but continued. "And Sophia had to drop out of grad school because we couldn't afford it, and we're behind on rent, and I lost my job, and you thought you'd come ask Dave for money." I finished. "Let me guess. You tried asking Greg first, and he mysteriously became unavailable?" Sophia spoke up then, her voice small and embarrassed. "He said he'd help, but then he just stopped returning my calls." "Shocking," I said flatly. "Absolutely shocking that the guy who abandoned you at 4 and sent you $20 at Christmas couldn't come through when you actually needed him. Who could have possibly seen that coming?" I looked directly at Sophia. "Oh wait, I did. 12 years ago. But I was just the boring, practical guy who didn't get you." "Dave, please," Laura said, tears streaming down her face now. "We're desperate. We might get evicted. We have nowhere else to go. You said I'm not her dad." I said simply, looking at Sophia. "You said I'm just your stepdad, that I'm not real family. So why would I help you? You've got a real dad. Ask him." "He won't help," Sophia whispered. "Yeah, well, that's what real dads do apparently. They don't help. They're not there. They don't show up. But you wanted him anyway. You wanted him to walk you down the aisle because biology matters more than actually being present. So go ask your real dad for money. Ask him to save you. I'm sure he'll come through." I started to close the door, and Laura stuck her foot in it. "Dave, please. Think about everything we had together. Think about Sophia. Get your foot out of my door." She pulled back, shocked at the ice in my voice. "I don't owe you anything," I said clearly. "Not one single thing. I gave you 12 years of my life, thousands of dollars, countless hours, unconditional love and support. And you threw it back in my face the second it became convenient. You chose Greg. You chose a deadbeat over someone who actually showed up. You made your choice. Now live with it. And I shut the door, locked it, walked away while they stood on my porch crying. It felt good. It felt really, really good. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I figured Laura and Sophia would slink back to wherever they came from, lick their wounds, and hopefully learn a valuable lesson about not burning bridges with the people who actually care about you. I figured they'd hit rock bottom, pull themselves up somehow, and I'd never hear from them again except maybe a Christmas card in 10 years with some awkward, hope you're well message that we'd both know was hollow. But I underestimated Laura's capacity for turning herself into a victim, and I severely underestimated the power of social media to make bad situations infinitely worse. About a week after they showed up at my cabin, my phone started blowing up. Not with calls from Laura or Sophia. I'd blocked both their numbers the day I shut the door in their faces, but with messages from old friends, former coworkers, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know if I'd seen Laura's post. I hadn't. I barely used social media anymore. My Facebook profile was dormant, my Instagram was non-existent, and I'd never understood Twitter or whatever it was calling itself these days. But apparently Laura had decided that if she couldn't get money from me, she'd try to get sympathy from everyone else. My brother Mark forwarded me the post. I probably should have just deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. Always does. Laura had written this long, melodramatic post about how she and Sophia were facing eviction and homelessness. How they'd come to me, her ex-husband, begging for help, and I'd slammed the door in their faces. How after everything we'd been through together and all the years we'd spent as a family, I'd abandoned them in their darkest hour. How Sophia had always seen me as her real father, which was a fascinating revision of history, and was devastated that I'd rejected her. She'd used phrases like cruel betrayal and heartless abandonment and turned his back on us. She'd painted herself as this tragic figure, a struggling single mother trying to survive, and me as this monster who'd discarded them like trash the second they needed help. She'd even thrown in some stuff about how I'd financially controlled her during our marriage and manipulated Sophia, which was absolutely wild considering I'd spent 12 years funding their entire lives and asking for nothing in return. The comments section was exactly what you'd expect. Hundreds of people who knew nothing about the actual situation rushing to Laura's defense. What kind of man abandons his family? He raised her since she was a child, and now he won't help? This is so sad. Praying for you, Laura. Men are trash. I hope karma gets him. A few people pushed back, asked for the full story, pointed out that there were probably two sides to this situation. But they got shouted down pretty quickly. The mob had their pitchforks out, and they were looking for a villain, and Laura had helpfully pointed them in my direction. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let Laura have her moment of viral sympathy and stay out of it entirely. I'd spent 3 years building a peaceful life away from their drama, and engaging with this circus felt like a step backward. Mark agreed, told me to let it blow over, said that anyone who actually knew me would know the truth, and everyone else's opinion didn't matter. But then my business started getting affected. Miller Landscapes started getting negative reviews online from people who'd never even used our services. We lost 2 contracts because the clients had seen Laura's post and didn't want to work with someone who was that kind of person. My email inbox filled up with strangers telling me I was scum, that I deserved to die alone, that they hoped I'd experience the same abandonment I'd inflicted on my family. That's when I decided, screw it. If Laura wanted to play this game, I'd play too. But unlike her, I had receipts. I created a fresh social media account, didn't even use my real name at first, just Truth About LM, and I posted everything. And I mean everything. I posted screenshots of bank statements showing 12 years of payments for Sophia's expenses. Dance classes, sports equipment, school trips, car insurance, phone bills, all paid by me. I showed the college fund statements, showing how I'd saved over $30,000 for her education. I posted receipts for the wedding I'd been planning to fund. $40,000 in deposits, all canceled after Sophia told me I wasn't her real dad. I posted screenshots of text messages. Sophia complaining about me to her friends, calling me just the money guy, saying I was boring and practical and didn't get her. Laura discussing with Sophia how to ask me for money without me asking too many questions about where it was going. I posted the timeline. How Greg had abandoned them when Sophia was 4. How he'd sent $20 one Christmas. How he disappeared for 13 years and then showed up when Sophia was 17, suddenly playing super dad with zero responsibilities or financial contribution. How Sophia had chosen him to walk her down the aisle over me, the guy who'd raised her since she was 9. I even posted a photo of the wooden arch I'd built. Weeks of work, hours and hours of effort, all for a wedding where I'd been demoted to audience member. The caption was simple. This is what not a real dad builds for his stepdaughter's wedding, before she tells him he's not good enough to walk her down the aisle. And then, the nuclear option, I posted a voicemail. One that Sophia had left me about 2 years before the wedding, when she was 19. She'd called me drunk from some college party, crying about how Laura was dating some new guy who was creepy and made her uncomfortable, and she wished I still lived with them because I'd always made her feel safe. She'd called me Dad in that voicemail. Multiple times. Dad, I miss you. Dad, why did you and Mom have to split up? Dad, I wish you were still here. I'd saved that voicemail because it was one of the few times post-divorce that Sophia had acknowledged our relationship meant something. And now I posted it publicly with the caption. This is the same person who told me I'm just her stepdad and not her real father. This is the person whose mother is claiming I abandoned them. The post went viral. Like, really viral. Within 24 hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Within 48 hours, news outlets were picking it up. Local Pittsburgh news, then regional, then a few national outlets because apparently stepdad exposes truth about abandonment claims was click-worthy content. The tide turned completely. Suddenly, everyone who'd been attacking me was apologizing or deleting their comments. The internet mob that had been ready to destroy me switched targets and went after Laura and Sophia instead. People dug up Laura's social media history and found posts where she'd called me a godsend and a wonderful father to Sophia. They found photos of Sophia with me at graduations and birthdays with captions like, "Best dad ever." The backlash was brutal. Way more brutal than what I'd experienced, honestly. People started calling Laura a gold digger, a manipulator, a liar. They called Sophia entitled, ungrateful, spoiled. Someone started a hashtag Team Dave, which was flattering but also kind of weird. There were memes. Actual memes about the situation. One showed the Drake meme format. Drake rejecting real dad who shows up, and Drake approving deadbeat dad with DNA. Laura's employer, she'd gotten a new job at some medical office, fired her after the story went public. They released some corporate statement about not wanting to be associated with the situation and how her actions didn't reflect their values. Which was probably unfair, honestly, but I wasn't exactly rushing to her defense given that she'd tried to tank my business with her lies. Sophia apparently lost her waitressing job too, though that might have been because she couldn't handle the constant recognition and comments from customers who'd seen the story. Someone told me she'd had a complete meltdown at the restaurant, screaming at a customer who'd made a snide comment about real dads, and the manager had told her not to come back. Greg, predictably, was nowhere to be found during any of this. The few times reporters tracked him down for comment, he said he didn't want to get involved, and that this was between Dave and Laura. Real stand-up guy, that Greg. His daughter was getting destroyed online, and he couldn't even be bothered to defend her. But sure, he was the real dad Sophia wanted. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets wanted interviews. Podcasts wanted me as a guest. Some producer from a daytime talk show reached out about appearing on their show to tell my story. I declined all of it. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd posted the truth. I wasn't interested in becoming some viral sensation or turning this into a media circus bigger than it already was. But the messages kept coming. People thanking me for standing up for stepparents everywhere. Other stepdads sharing their own stories of being taken for granted. Even some bio dads who said they'd learned something from the situation. It was overwhelming, honestly. I just wanted to clear my name and protect my business. I hadn't expected to become some kind of symbol for something larger. About a month after I posted the receipts, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual physical letter delivered to my cabin. The return address said it was from Sophia, though there was no address listed, just her name. I almost threw it away without opening it. Almost. But that same stupid curiosity that had made me read Laura's Facebook post made me open the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, with several crossed-out sections and what looked like tear stains on the paper. It started with an apology. Not the performative kind of apology where someone's sorry they got caught or sorry people are mad at them, but what seemed like a genuine expression of remorse. She wrote about how she'd been young and stupid and selfish, how she'd taken me for granted because I was always there, and she'd romanticized Greg because he wasn't. How she'd bought into this fantasy that biology mattered more than showing up, and by the time she'd realized how wrong she was, she'd already burned every bridge. How watching Greg disappear again the second things got hard had been a harsh wake-up call about who people really are versus who you want them to be. She wrote about the rose garden, about how she'd driven past our old house a few months ago and seen that the new owners had torn it out to put in a pool, how that had broken something in her, realizing that this thing we'd built together was just gone, erased like it never mattered. How she wished she'd appreciated it while it existed, instead of abandoning it the way she'd abandoned everything else that was actually good in her life. She wrote, "You were my real dad. You were the only dad who mattered. And I destroyed that because I was too immature to see what I had. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Too late, but I understand. You were right about everything. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The letter ended with, "I love you, Dad. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it in a way that mattered. I hope someday you can be happy, because you deserve that more than anyone I've ever known." I read that letter 3 times. Then I folded it very carefully, put it back in the envelope, and stuck it in a drawer in my kitchen. The same drawer where I kept instruction manuals for appliances and takeout menus from restaurants I never ordered from. The drawer for things that might be useful someday, but probably wouldn't be. I didn't respond. Didn't call. Didn't write back. Didn't reach out in any way. Because here's the thing about apologies. They're nice and all, but they don't fix what's broken. They don't give you back the years you wasted or the hurt you endured. They don't erase the damage or restore what was lost. Sophia was right about one thing in her letter. It was too late. Too late to undo the choices she'd made. Too late to take back the words she'd said. Too late to rebuild something that had been demolished so thoroughly there wasn't even a foundation left to build on. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe that makes me unforgiving. Maybe I should have been the bigger person one more time, should have reached out and tried to reconcile, should have given her another chance to be part of my life. But I'd spent 12 years being the bigger person. 12 years giving chances and overlooking slights and putting other people's needs before my own. And where had it gotten me? Standing alone in a cabin in the woods, reading an apology that was sincere but ultimately meaningless because it couldn't change anything that mattered. So I left the letter in the drawer, and I went back to my peaceful life. Back to my cabin, my work, my solitude. Back to the life I'd built for myself after escaping the wreckage of the family I tried so hard to create. 1 year after the letter, I got a notification that someone had requested to follow me on Instagram, the account I'd created to post the truth about what happened. The username was just initials and numbers, nothing identifying. But the profile picture, tiny as it was, looked like Sophia. Older, different haircut, but probably her. I declined the request, blocked the account, and that was that. Some doors don't just close. They slam shut with a finality that echoes forever. They lock from the inside with deadbolts and chains and the kind of security that no key can open. Not remorse, not apologies, not even genuine change. Because sometimes the damage is too deep. Sometimes the betrayal cuts too close to the bone. Sometimes you give everything you have to people who treat it like nothing, and when they finally realize what they lost, it's too late. The person they hurt isn't the same person anymore. That person learned to protect themselves. That person learned that love without respect is worthless. That person learned that being alone is better than being taken for granted. I learned all of that. Learned it the hard way. Learned it at the cost of 12 years and thousands of dollars and a piece of my heart that I'll never get back. But I learned it. And now, sitting on my porch in the Poconos, watching the sun set over the trees I planted myself, maintaining the property I built with my own hands, living the peaceful life I chose for myself, I can honestly say I'm okay with how things turned out. I'm not happy about the journey, not proud of the pain and disappointment and betrayal that got me here, but I'm okay with the destination. More than okay. I'm good. Because I finally learned the most important lesson of all. You can't make people value you. You can't earn love through sacrifice and showing up and doing everything right. Some people will take and take and take until you're empty, and then they'll be surprised when you have nothing left to give. The punchline to this whole mess. The final joke in this comedy of errors that was my attempt at being a father? I was a great dad. I did everything right. And it still wasn't enough because I was never going to be enough for people who'd already decided I didn't really count. But here's the thing about punchlines. They're only funny if someone's listening. And I stopped listening to Laura and Sophia's narrative about me a long time ago. I wrote my own ending. And in my ending, the guy who showed up, who did the work, who loved unconditionally and asked for nothing in return, that guy got the last laugh. Because while they're still struggling with the consequences of their choices, still dealing with the fallout of burning bridges they couldn't afford to burn, I'm sitting on my porch in the woods, at peace for the first time in years, owing nothing to anyone. Some might call that revenge. Some might call it justice. Some might call it cold and unforgiving. I call it self-respect. And that's the best punchline of all.